Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. As I said earlier, it's a soggy day here in coastal Virginia, and the rain's coming down. I looked at the radar a little while ago, and it doesn't seem like the rain's going to stop anytime in the near future. So we'll just enjoy a rainy day. I thank you for being here. And as I said yesterday, um, it's come time for me to say that if you value this presentation and you receive inspiration from it, if you could please contribute your love as money to this mission, it would be greatly appreciated. And if you're willing to do that, please send your contribution by check or money order to Reverend Paul Fitzsimmons, 7773 Belroy Road, Gloucester, Virginia, 23061. Okay, I'm happy to have that out of the way. I have it's really hilarious that I have a resistance to asking you for help. And I realize that that has come from the training that I received and that I talk about all the time, that is there to be replaced by a knowing that we contribute to each other in every way we can to continue to move forward. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's begin our 9 a.m. session this morning, as has become our tradition, with our breathing practice. And so we breathe in through our nose and hold, and then breathe out through our mouth. And so we'll begin, hold, begin, hold, breathe in, hold, breathe in, hold, breathe out. So let's come back, shake our hands a little bit, open our eyes. We'll say good morning to Mary Lee. It's nice to see you, Mary Lee. Thanks for acknowledging your presence. Anybody that's out there, if you want to send me a message and say hi, I'd appreciate it. Let me know you're there. I got a shingles vaccination the other day, and it caused me to have a little fever last night. So I'm glad that I was able to sleep through that and get rid of it. So I don't know about you, but when I employ that practice of breathing in and holding and breathing out, I can feel the tension release in my body. I can feel all the muscles and everything relax, and allows me to be a more susceptible vessel to the powers of greater consciousness that are flowing around me and through me and in me all the time. And so we we are so fortunate to be here on this planet to experience the opportunities of this free will experience. The one of the one understanding that I was taught as a child and that I had to address on my own and to overcome was the idea that I am born once, I am created by God, and I have one opportunity to fulfill God's desire for me. And if I do that well enough, I will be allowed into a place known as heaven. And if I do not do that well enough, I will not be allowed into this place known as heaven. Good morning, Jim. It's good to see you. I um, I had to let go of that. I did a lot of studying um, to verify for myself that, in fact, that rule, canon is what it's called in the church, was not initial in the teachings of Christendom. Initially, in the teachings of Christendom, it was taught that we reincarnate until we experience this level of understanding and consciousness that Christed Jesus shared with us and told us that we would experience. Somewhere around 500 AD, there was an emperor of Rome named Justinian who was married to a woman who had a desire. Her name was Theodora, and her desire, after she had a pretty good life, and it's worth reading if you're interested. You can just Google Justinian, Emperor Justinian, and it'll come up and you can read as much as you want about it. But after going through quite a few trials and tribulations, Theodora decided that she wanted to be deified. She wanted to be upheld in the Roman context as a god. And that to do that, it was necessary to remove the idea that you're born again and again and again until you embrace the consciousness of divine presence. Because in that understanding of embracing the consciousness of divine presence, it allows each one of us to know that at the end of the day, we are made in the image and likeness of God, and that we are inherently of the same stuff God is. Therefore, at the end of the day, once we embrace that, as the Christed Jesus said, I and the Father are one. And so, if I and the Father are one, how could someone be deified and held up as an independent God? So it was removed. So incarnation was removed from the Christian canons as a result of an edict from Justinian. I think it was about 546 AD that came down. And at that point, the whole story shifted to fulfill that consciousness. And it comes to what we have today, that we are born as a human being. We have one life. It lasts somewhere, well, it lasts as long as it lasts. And during that period, we have the opportunity to do the best we can to fit ourselves to be accepted into the gates of heaven. For me, what I understand, how I know is so, is that that is not the case. That this practice that we're involved in, this free will that is available to us, allows us to embrace the possibility and the understanding and the realization that we are all of all that is. We are all of God. There is nothing that is not of God. And that when we realize, each of us, that I am of God, then our ability to embrace our individual divine understanding becomes real. So I bring all that to fore because once a person embraces that, once a person understands for themselves that individual, that is in fact the case, then the releasing oneself from the training that was presented upon being born into this reality no longer is required. And so the unlearning of that which we were raised with and the relearning or the retraining into what is more realistic is in place. And therein lies the activities that I continuously talk about. As long as one is comfortable with the idea and fulfilled by the idea that they have one attempt to make it to heaven, then there's no reason for question. There's no reason for change. But when one's life has been similar to mine, when there's activities in this life that could be from the perspective that there is sin and there is heavy sin and there is lighter sin, and some sin is unforgivable and some sin is not, then one finds themselves in a place of accepting that they're either going to realize a different understanding or they're going to be bound for this place known as hell. And so today, I'm coming again to the place where I share with you that retraining ourselves is the most important reality. There are those aspects of traditional Christian belief, and I speak about Christian with you because we live in the United States of America generally, and generally speaking, the spiritual understanding of this United States of America comes from the Judeo-Christian tradition, and that that Judeo-Christian tradition lines up certain parameters that we have been taught and have been ingrained in us. And when one comes to realize that those teachings are not so, then the untraining of that is necessary. For anyone who's ever been in the work world, so I was a painter. I had a painting contracting company, and I would have painters that would come and work for me. And so, being the contractor, being the boss, I had parameters on how things would happen, and I intended that people that worked for me did certain tasks in certain ways. And there's all kinds of different ways to do certain tasks. But all of us know who have been the boss that if you want to get a specific result, you need to apply a specific technique. And what I learned was it's so much easier to teach someone who doesn't have any idea what's going on than it is to unteach someone who has an idea and thinks it's right about what's going on, and then reteach them. So oftentimes I would choose completely novice individuals and have them trained up to the standard that my company desired, as compared to take on someone who had a history of a different type of technique that didn't work in our company. And so I bring it to you that the untraining of ourselves is really about the most difficult part of this whole practice. Because the releasing myself from the training that I was given as a child when I arrived here, that was linked into something that was known as fear, and that I was impacted with the fear of failure, the fear of not being good enough to get into the gates of heaven, the fear of not being good enough to be acceptable, the fear of not having enough, the fear of being separate from. All of those fears were used as tools to bring me to a place to believe that unless I accepted the canons of the Christian faith as they were presented to me, that I was doomed to live out eternity in a place of fire and hell. I'm so grateful that I know that is not the case today. I am so grateful. And so I've written a little pamphlet. Actually, I have rewritten a little pamphlet, and it will be published in the not distant future. And it is an outline of practices that will give one the availability, if they choose, to unmind this teaching of their childhood and of the society, and remind or retrain themselves, myself, to a different way of perceiving or seeing. And so I wanted to just share with you some of how the first retraining application works. And it says, retraining consciousness is specific spiritual practice within oneself, upon oneself, about oneself, to change oneself. Retraining is a conscious change of thought, and the work begins and ends in the thought of the one applying retraining. So it begins and ends with me, with I am. It begins and ends with you, of free choice. So the first application in the retraining practice is to define the nature of all that is, what we refer to in the United States of America as God. Make statements about all that is. Declare what you believe divine mind to be in your own terms. Write out a list of synonyms for all that is. Speak these definitions aloud and rapidly as often as you can. Remember that you already have a vocabulary and an ability to describe negativity and fear in every possible way. By defining divine mind and lengthening your list daily, you are soon able to build a vocabulary that describe goddess, the truth, God, good, omnipotent. Words are important. Develop a flow and ease in making vocal statements of truth. This is the first step. This is the first practice in the retraining process. This will allow us to move from a place of believing to a place of knowing. And the place of knowing is the place of understanding. Back to our painting reference, I knew and I know that if a person applies a certain painting technique in a specific way, a specific result will manifest. And the same is so with every other aspect of this three-dimensional plane. And so the spiritual practice that allows us to open up to the freedom of understanding is right there in front of us at all the time. All the time. And we can move from believing that this might be so to knowing that it is in fact so. I salute you as the presence of God wherever you are. I acknowledge you as divine understanding and consciousness. Namaste, namaste, namaste.